What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, yesterday, Sony announced a state of play that'll be happening later on this afternoon, and it should give us an idea as to their plans for the rest of the year and beyond when it comes to first-party and third-party games, even maybe support for a certain accessory on PC, and we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about the Circana or MPD sales for the month of April that gives us a look as to where Stellar Blade placed and even declines when it comes to hardware across the board. And then we do have a game at long last that could be going multi-platform, and it's been stuck this whole time on Apple Arcade, and I am really excited to see the reaction to this one. We'll go over all of that and more. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Midori as they put out some more information, this time around Monolith Soft and a certain game or project that they're currently working on. We can see this posted up. This is over on their account where they say, I was told a few months ago that Monolith Soft was working on a project with codename Legacy, but I do not have any more information. It's interesting. They seem to know a lot about these different code names with not much else in terms of context around it. They've linked things like the Mario stuff to other code names in the franchise, sure, but in this case, Monolith Soft, codename Legacy. Well, you start to think back to older games and properties they've worked on. Some mention, Xenosaga maybe? Well, they came back and said that this is specifically within Nintendo and published by Nintendo. So others were thinking maybe it's Xenoblade Chronicles X, as that's like the only Xenoblade we really don't have that's been moved up to Switch and maybe even their next generation system. And I guess it's possible. They've mentioned Monolith Soft that it would take a bit more work for Xenoblade Chronicles X specifically to be ported over, and a lot of it has to do with its reliance on like the Wii U and stuff, so the tablet second screen setup there, but that would be really cool to see that happen, especially if they maybe had it planned for next generation. They can take advantage of all the additional features when it comes to the graphical upgrades and even faster loading times, that sort of thing. Also, there was speculation before around the split for what Sony's user base is right now between the PS5 and the PS4, and it appeared it was essentially down the middle, 50-50, and now Sony has basically confirmed this. We can see it posted up. This was during their PlayStation business meeting for the future, and in here, we can see on page 14, they go over their engaged user base, and we can see it is indeed 49 million on PS4, 49 million on PS5. These are monthly active consoles as of April 30th, 2024. Now, they do mention that the total gameplay hours is skewed in favor of the PS5 by quite a bit. It's like, what, 65-35 or something like that. But still, the fact that there are still 49 million PlayStation 4 owners logging in and playing different games, which I can only imagine a lot of live service stuff with like Fortnite, with maybe Call of Duty Warzone and so on. That does, of course, influence Sony's plans when it comes to making these games, and why we saw so much in terms of the cross-generation period that feels like we're moving away from now, but it's hard to argue with that. When you have 49 million people out there with the PS4, yeah, you're probably going to try to make your games work there too. Oh, and here's a fun one I thought I would point out just to make everyone feel extra old today. Mario Kart 8 is officially 10 years old. It came out May 29th, 2014 in Japan, May 30th, 2014 in the US, and well, there we have it. The official 10-year period of release for Mario Kart is complete. 8 can be, put behind us now, rearview mirror, right? We're definitely not going to get a Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Plus for the next generation. I mean, you feel like Nintendo wants to move full speed ahead on the next big Mario Kart first year. Clearly, they're not going to be pushing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe that much. I mean, the thing sells only like 3 million copies a quarter or something. It's absolutely ridiculous. We need to get away from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but I figured, hey, I would point it out. Yes, it has officially been 10 years since Mario Kart 8 released way back on the Wii U. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Sony and their state of play that is scheduled for later on this afternoon, which we can see this posted up over on PlayStation blog, where they say state of play is back. Tune in live for updates on PlayStation 5, PSVR 2 titles, plus a look at PlayStation Studios games arriving later this year. The 30-plus minute show features 14 titles, and it begins May 30th, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So obviously going to be streaming and stuff on YouTube. They say Twitch, TikTok, the whole deal there. Plenty of places to watch this. And no, it's not a showcase necessarily, but we have had really good state of plays that have taken place. So I do believe they say 14 titles in 30 minutes, and yes, there will be PSVR 2 stuff baked in, but there kind of needs to be. Like, Sony has to have some interesting software for the hardware to try to sell it with the PS5 and the VR2, so hopefully they have something interesting there for that headset. I know there are VR enthusiasts out there like, oh, there's stuff releasing all over the place. Well, not enough necessarily, or not enough that's compelling people to go out and buy a headset that costs the same or even more than the console itself. So VR2, hopefully there's something there that can get people really checking for it. But in this case, we're all going to be really looking for first-party stuff from Sony, which we hear about things like Astrobot, and apparently there is a 3D platforming Astrobot game that's not necessarily going to be tied fully to VR2 that should be slated for later on this year. Concord, that should be there as well, as it is still coming out later this year, and it being a live service game with Sony kind of being on a roll after Helldivers 2. We'll see how this one fares and maybe keeps that momentum going along. And then most likely some third-party stuff, and I'm sure a few other surprises. I wouldn't mind seeing them make an announcement for one of their bigger studios, even if their game is still 2 years, 3 years off, just to give us an idea as to what exactly is happening with maybe a Naughty Dog who, let's face it, has done a lot of remasters, remakes. I wouldn't mind seeing Sucker Punch and what their next big game is there. So there are at least some ways they can go with this state of play, and with 14 different games, there's definitely going to be a lot of room for it. Some people have wondered if the PS5 Pro would be here, and it's possible. We saw the PlayStation Portal, the earbuds and all that just sort of be shown immediately during a presentation, and then they came back to it later on. I guess they could introduce it. I just don't really know if it's required at this time, because it's still going to play the same games. And what they did with the PS4 Pro is they announced it 2 months before it came out. So let's say the PS5 Pro is coming out in October. Maybe they show it in August, even early September, and they're like, oh, you can pick it up here in like 60 days or something like that. So that's kind of the avenue I think they'll go with it, but it's possible they could just show it and be like, yeah, we got this planned for later on this year. Stay tuned for more details. Now, doubling back to VR2 for a minute, it does appear that Sony is preparing an announcement that it will be compatible with PC, which they've already mentioned they're working to get it onto the PC platform in some fashion by the end of this year, but now it's becoming a bit more tangible because we can see this is posted up, as it was noticed by, sadly, it's Brad Lynch, says, Sony is certifying an adapter to allow PSVR2 hardware to work on PCs, and we can see the certification status here for the PlayStation VR2 PC adapter, which, yeah, you probably will need, I don't think it's just going to plug in directly to a USB-C port on a PC. There probably will be some sort of box in between or adapter that you need to plug in, as they're showing it, but like a cable that's additional to it for any information or anything that they need to translate between what the PSVR 2 would expect to see if it's plugged directly into a PlayStation 5 versus maybe even a random port you have on your PC. So we'll see how that exactly turns out, and I guess how involved that ends up being. But this makes a ton of sense for Sony to try to push more and more VR2 headsets. You sell it to the PC enthusiasts who probably look at that headset as a good deal, as opposed to people who have a PS5 and they're like, okay, no, that's the same amount as my console. If you look at the VR landscape on PC, it's not uncommon to spend $1,000 on a headset and the whole setup. So yeah, VR2 from Sony would actually look pretty good in comparison. But either way, I'm excited to see what Sony has in store for us, and the fact that Konami is following this presentation up pretty much immediately. We'll hear about Silent Hill 2, I assume, and some other surprises there. So should be a lot of fun later on today. Next up, let's talk about the NPD sales results, also now known as Circana results, for April of 2024, which we'll take a look at the top games here, starting with, yes, Stellar Blade. It was indeed number 1. Now, it is great that it topped the sales charts here. Matt Piscatella did add some more context that if you look like year to date now, it comes up as number 16 cumulative sales. So it's not exactly a big month in general for gaming in the US, but still, topping the sales charts anywhere, especially in the US. Stellar Blade, it's awesome to see there. Good for Shift Up. And then we have Helldivers 2 at number 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Sea of Thieves, Fallout 4, MLB The Show 24, Dragon's Dogma 2, Fallout 76, Hogwarts Legacy, and EA Sports FC 24 rounds out the top 10. I also wanted to point out Grounded, even though it's not in the top 10, it is number 12, and that jumped all the way up from number 167. That and Fallout 76 had pretty much the biggest jumps in terms of these sales charts. I mean, just massive, massive moves. So, I mean, Grounded going to other platforms, that was big. And with Fallout 76, just the show, I mean, just the impact of that Amazon Prime series that we've seen now, it's impressive stuff, what that's able to do outside of games to then move sales of video games. As for hardware, we can see Matt Piscatella followed up saying, April video game hardware spending fell 43% when compared to a year ago to $208 million. All current console hardware platforms fell a minimum of 26% year on year, with Switch showing the strongest year-on-year decline. It's down 69%. Now moving on, they say PlayStation 5 again led the month's hardware market in unit and dollar sales. Nintendo Switch once again finished second in unit sales, while Xbox Series ranked second in dollar. Oh, and the PlayStation Portal was the best-selling accessory in dollar sales for both April and 2024 year to date. So hey, the controller with a screen on it at $200 is doing pretty well, it seems. Although, I guess since they track like by revenue or dollars spent typically for these charts, that makes sense. $200 controller versus your typical $65 or $70 controller. Still, a PlayStation Portal, yeah, it seems to be doing well enough for Sony, especially in these Circana sales charts. But looking at the hardware, that is definitely a massive decline across the board, although we have been seeing kind of a correction in general after the lockdown stuff and how things were really inflated, and we're seeing the opposite side of the bell curve at this point for all of the systems. The Switch clearly further along than the other two, but I mean, even Sony's kind of mentioned that the PS5 has more or less peaked, and now they're anticipating to sell less PS5s going forward than they did the year prior, and Xbox has seemingly just been declining consistently for like the past couple of years now. But yeah, that's sort of where we are. And with Nintendo looking towards their holiday season now with a pretty lofty goal of 13.5 million Switch systems for the entire fiscal year. Hopefully they have a really good direct up their sleeve in a couple of weeks, and that could maybe propel sales for the Switch once again heading into that holiday season. As for Sony, they just seem to be on track for matching the PS4, and Microsoft, who knows? Apparently going into 2026, they're going to try to launch a whole new generation anyway. Next up, let's talk about a game that's been locked to Apple Arcade for years now. I did a video on the Apple Arcade experience, took a look around the selection of games, and there were a few that I thought were really impressive, actually, and definitely flew under the radar because it's only on that service, and the vast majority of people just are not subscribed to Apple Arcade. Even if they get it for free when they, say, buy an Apple TV 4K, they don't think to even look or use that subscription at all. So when I hear that Fantasian could finally be making the jump to multi-platform, I get pretty excited. So we can see this is posted up once again by Midori, who says an Apple Arcade title will be announced for multiple platforms soon. Please wait for more information, which people started to speculate, like, okay, what Apple Arcade title would it be? There's a Sonic, 3D Sonic game on there. Okay, maybe it's that. Or, as Likio says here, which Midori did respond and basically point at it, saying Fantasian Nintendo Direct. Okay, so again, if you're not familiar with Fantasian, which we'll take a look at a poll that I put up, we'll take a look at that here in a little bit later on in the show. This is actually from Mistwalker, and it was specifically developed at the time with Apple Arcade in mind for iOS, macOS, tvOS, and it's been there ever since. So 3 years or so, it's just been sitting there at this time. And this was made by Hironobu Sakaguchi with music by Nobu Uematsu, and they're obviously well known for Final Fantasy, the franchise. So to see this finally getting opened up to a larger audience, it's really exciting stuff to see how this works out. And clearly having Mistwalker there at the forefront maybe working to develop other games outside of this. I mean, you put it on different platforms outside of Apple Arcade, and all of a sudden they can start selling a bunch of copies and kind of moving on to other projects. So this game in particular is very unique with its look. This is the one where they did like the small dioramas and used photogrammetry to make it have a very realistic look with the backgrounds, while also still paying homage to like the older PS1 pre-rendered backgrounds. You remember those? So it sort of plays into that, and it is definitely a very unique and different looking game for that. So I recommend checking this one out if indeed it is at Nintendo Direct, and it seems like people are now anticipating it to show up there. So hey, exciting stuff there for Mistwalker to have this game get out there, and I assume it's going to just be dropped on all platforms, unless maybe Nintendo came in and said, all right, we want that specifically for the Switch, but I guess we'll see here in the coming weeks. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a new Nintendo Entertainment System game. Like a game for the NES from the 80s. In fact, you can see this video here, and this is for Super Tilt Bro. It's a fighting game, they say, with platforming mechanics in the pure tradition of the platform fighter genre. You run, jump, and punch around to repel your opponent out of the platform. But most of all, you'll be able to play online through your internet connection against players all around the world. And that's not just through, say, an emulator. Well, they do have a ROM file. You can play it on an emulator when you buy the game. They have a Wi-Fi antenna and chipset built in to the board in the cartridge for Super Tilt Bro that you would pop into your original Nintendo. And from there, they show you can punch in a password with someone else who has it. And you could actually play online with your original Nintendo system. You know, it does make me think back to the old days of when we had these expansion chips inside of Nintendo and Super Nintendo games to alter and even upgrade them in different ways. I almost wonder if, let's just say, in an alternate universe, there was never any other system beyond, we'll just say, the original Nintendo. Would they have eventually worked to the point where they just started putting Wi-Fi chips in the thing, and it's like, there you go, you can connect the internet that way? It was, and it's kind of cool. It's a fun callback even to that point in time where that's how upgrades were happening, not on the system level itself, but on the cartridge level. Anyway, apparently this was a Kickstarter project that was completely funded, and now they have it set up for pre-order with the whole physical copy and all that. So you can check it out. I'll have it linked down below in the sources. Just thought it was really cool to see, I guess, someone decide to put a Wi-Fi chip in a Nintendo game so they can have their game have online multiplayer. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played Fantasian? 3% say yes, 22% say no, and then 75% say, what's Fantasian? And I looked through the comments, there were many people who said, you know, hey, I've been waiting for this to come to anything else. It's stuck on Apple Arcade. I'm not gonna really play it there. I just can't. So hearing about this going to other platforms, I think it will be just a full-on introduction for many people to the game. And for others who do know about it, will probably get very, very excited and be ready to pick it up. And I do hope, if anything else, there is a physical copy, whether that's done by Mistwalker themselves, Nintendo, Sony, limited run comes in. Someone should pick this up and do a physical release for it, because I think that would be awesome to see. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Venom, who says, getting these PS2 games is a decent step up, but a perfect world, we would have been able to put our discs in, rip the disc data to the hard drive so the system emulator could play the games as they were, no online connection needed, and no modified games being forced upon us. I can only hope we see that in the future, but I have doubts. I mean, even with Microsoft, while you can put the disc into the system, still needs to call to a server and download the files needed. I mean, the disc is really just there as a check, and that's it. So Microsoft has at least been a bit more interested, seemingly, in the backwards compatible side of things. I would like the idea of Sony to let you put your PS2 disc into the system and it just rips it, but I think there are other files and things that have to work with it, and either way, it would probably have to pull stuff from a server. So one way or the other, you're going to be calling with an online check to make it work. It is a shame also that it doesn't seem to read CDs, because that, I mean, PS1 games, obviously. But the thing I would love for us to get to is if you could put a PS3 disc in, whether it's the PS5 or eventually the PS6, and you can play your PS3 games natively. That's the biggest part now that I want to see Sony figure out, is getting away from the streaming PS3 game stuff and have all kinds of enhancements and let you play those games natively, because there are many titles that are just stuck on the PS3, and I'd love to see Sony get that all figured out with emulation so that we can go back and revisit some of these with our current systems. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Sony and their state of play happening later on this afternoon? Of course, leave some predictions down below in the comments, or with PSVR 2, if they do indeed announce an adapter and that's all set up for PC, would you be picking one of those up? And Fantasian, if it does indeed get revealed for multi-platform release here in the coming weeks, are you going to pick that one up? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.